So thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I appreciate the chance to say that what is on my heart and also something of the experience of many people, your neighbors, living not far from Australia. Indonesia is looking for credibility and wants to be known as a responsible modern nation. It's clear embraced by its own shameful treatment of ethnic and religious minorities and the fact so many of its people are living as refugees around the world, not only in Australia, but in Papua New Guinea, in Dutch. Indonesia is embarrassed to have so many people imprisoned in its own jail on political charge. These things reveal the truth about the government of Indonesia and that it's still a repressive military regime in many, many respects. My question is this: is there any significant reduction in repression in West Papua? I think my brother from Indonesia, journalist, is here. I hope you're writing something. If tomorrow morning you're writing something, must writing good about the story. Don't say I'm dictator. Remember that. West Papua, we are respect Indonesian people come to our country, our land as a human being. We don't use gun to shoot people, but we really respect. Today, in newspaper, you can read in The Age or another newspaper, they report about how Indonesia hear about this meeting, and then they start to complain. This is for example, how they did to me to stop so I can't organize any peaceful protest in West Papua, so I escaped for my life. I decided to escape to Australia. So I don't know, maybe Indonesia is scared if I'm say something based on the truth. I know in West Papua, many journalists, they can writing something based on the truth story. That's why they ban foreigner people not to go to West Papua. That's why my question is this: is there any significant reduction in the repression in West Papua? As a former political prisoner and coordinator of the 43 asylum seekers, also as a West Papua National Authority for Asia Pacific, let me remind you that the systematic repression, terror, oppression, intimidation, rape, kidnapping, incarceration, poisoning, and murder of indigenous Melanesians in West Papua is not different to the situation we left in 2005. I've been active in independence movement, our students' movement, since 1988, 10 years before Indonesian so-called reformasi period, and haven't seen any significant improvement in the Indonesian government approach to the political or the social problem in West Papua. The military is still terrorize our people. They suppress any meaningful political life by means of systematic intimidation. They try to stifle our growth and fight our growing political maturity. This intimidation occurs in many ways, by way of the oppressive colonial administration run from Jakarta, by the stationing of armed forces in every village and township, by the suppression of free speech and political opposition. It occurs in subtle ways, and then it goes through serious human rights abuses like those committed in East Timor and in other parts of Indonesia. These are crimes against humanity and should be treated as crimes under international law. The Indonesian government has also attempted to close West Papua to the outside world, especially to journalists and investigators of social and ecological injustice. I hope Indonesian reforms can succeed in bringing Indonesia into the modern age. The scale of the justice needs to be adjusted so our people can be treated fairly after so many years of abuses at the hands of external rules. Until West Papua is democratized and demilitarized, West Papuan will remain skeptical about their political rhetoric from faraway Java. Today, some of our most promising students from Cendrawasih University are intimidated into giving up their study. This is hardly an environment where West Papua can have a prosperous future. I believe military agents are increasing around the campus activities after students' involvement in big demonstrations recently, like on 8th and 9th of July, how big massive protests in West Papua reject special autonomy. And many West Papuan students, they scared for their life. They didn't continue study in good feeling in campus university because they're scared if they continue study and then they look at to the door, some Indonesian intelligence can come and then arresting them and they'll lose concentrate on study or didn't continue with the study. So I believe military again are increasingly around the campus activities today in West Papua. It's not hard to imagine how tens of thousands of Indonesian troops, or maybe more than 10,000 troops, impact on people's daily lives, especially for students who are easy target. Another question is this: why would Indonesia send so many troops to West Papua, which are then mobilized for military operation? Is it to intimidate us and attack our freedom of speech, like I got here in Australia, and prevent us from peacefully gathering, like here tonight, in the land of our center, to express our identity and debate the domination of our peoples and plunder of our natural resources. Right now, 11th of August 2010, as I speak to you, the land of West Papua is in an extremely threatened situation, owing to the increase of soldiers of the TNI, National Army of Indonesia, which are increasingly being sent into West Papua since the 43 West Papua asylum seekers received their temporary protection visa, or now we got permanent residence given by Australia. So I thank you, Australian government, and your support, so I can say my story tonight. I involved in West Papuan students movement, and I was a political prisoner. Today, my friends in prison, they remind me, Herman, please, say our story. We are still in jail. What can international community do to help us behind the bar? So, okay, I will say your story tonight with those who come to listen my story and West Papuan story. We have maintained our dignity in face of oppression, insult, and prejudice. So many of our people have suffered, been imprisoned, and died. But we will continue to suffer. Mark my words. We will continue with our suffer and die under Indonesian military regime, occupy our land. But we won't stop our struggle for justice and freedom. We look to God. We look to people of goodwill like yourself. I pray you will hear our cry. Thank you.
Without knowing much about the history of West Papua, could you please explain a bit more about the plebiscite in 1969 and what the problems with it were? And I'd also be interested in knowing what the practical problems would be now in holding a plebiscite.
The UN agreed to hold a plebiscite in 1969, which was supposed to sample public opinion amongst the West Papuans. So a small group of just over 1,000 people, I think, were chosen to express their views, but they were intimidated into effectively a unanimous endorsement of incorporation within the Republic of Indonesia. But that intimidation completely invalidated the legitimacy of the ballot, and I don't know anyone who now regards it as being anything other than more of an example of what went wrong, what's been going wrong in West Papua. I don't think it has any legal or moral authority. Having said that, of course, it means that a true expression of political desire has not transpired, and it was promised to the people of West Papua by the United Nations, by the United States, and by Indonesia. So my argument is that until a legitimate plebiscite is conducted to authentically gauge the feelings of the people of West Papua, the issue won't go away. And 69, you know, we're now, 41 years later. We're still waiting for that particular event. But it seems to me that there is an obligation on the United Nations to follow through in what it promised the people there, and it should be something that the parties to that particular decision, including the US, Australia and Indonesia, should honour their obligations. And at the moment it represents everything that is wrong with the political settlement of West Papua. People there did not have the freedom to choose their own political arrangements, and that's what they're demanding now. Now, I have no idea what they would choose. I can guess, but I haven't got any idea. But it doesn't matter what I think or any outsider thinks. The only thing that's really important is what they think. And that's really, I think, where outsiders do have obligations. That is to force the hand of the UN to do that, to hold a proper plebiscite, and that will only happen if there is a major international sponsor at the UN within the Security Council. It doesn't have to be a permanent member, but it has to be one of the 15 members states. So unfortunately, the Dutch have not, as I said, followed the same road that the Portuguese ultimately followed in relation to East Timor, but it would seem that they are the most obvious candidates to do so, given they effectively transferred their sovereignty on West Papua over to the Indonesians on the basis of what was to say it was a flawed legal apparatus doesn't capture the full extent of it.
And sort of just the problems of having that now, what sort of literacy rates do they have over there at the moment?
Well, Herman's probably better at the detail on the ground, but the Hana Jalani, who conducted an investigation in 2007 on behalf of the Secretary-General of the United Nations, found that Human Development Index, which is a sort of a general indicator of the welfare of people, sort of development stage of the country, found that Indonesia had indeed made considerable progress since its democratisation, with one telling exception, West Papua, where the Melanesian population's standard of living has either stagnated or declined, and this ranges right across all of the measurements from political freedom, public health, public education, literacy rates, etc. So clearly, you might not agree with even the right of the the West Papuans to self-determination, but you can't challenge the UN's investigations, the independent body in this case, and it came up with some pretty clear findings that people who stand up for the right of self-determination self-determination in West Papua are persecuted, and there is a lot of work to be done to bring the Melanesian population of West Papua even up to the standard that exists amongst the transmigrant and economic migrant populations. I'm sorry I can't quote the figures off the top of my head, but
right now we have a second, third and fourth question, so I'll follow that order for now.
Okay, Peter Woods, this is for Scott. I'm just wondering what you think might get the attention of the United States.
There are members of Congress who have written to President Obama urging him to address the issue of West Papua when he visits Indonesia in November this year. Now, sometimes it's hard to gauge just how much influence 3 or 4 congressmen and women in the US do have, even though they're from the same party. But clearly, even that is insignificant. That's something, for example, you would never hear in the Australian Parliament being urged of the Prime Minister. So there is in many ways a much greater awareness of the issue in the United States. But then again, the United States announced recently that it would begin and recompose its relationship with Kopassus on the basis that Kopassus had gone through some sort of reformation of its actions, which of course are highly contentious, to put it mildly. So yes, the US is decisive in what happens, but of course President Obama is probably not heading to Indonesia with West Papua on his mind uppermost. I mean, he wants to. He has other interests, of course, and but it would take the mobilisation of opinion in the US, particularly amongst the political class, to get something up and running. But again, in East Timor, it wasn't the United States who made the running. The US were decisive in the interventionary force, Interfet, that arrived in 1999. But it was driven by Portuguese largely. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the US, but the US could always help. What's interesting to me is that is that even in the US, where highly paid lobbyists are preoccupied with what's going on in their own constituencies, that there is even a small number of congressmen who are prepared to write to the president to bring his attention to this issue, and that hope that he may mention it in any speech that he gives in Indonesia. Now, if he gives a speech at a university or wherever, I don't know what his program is, but there's a small chance that it might get mentioned somewhere, indirectly, obliquely, perhaps. But anything, of course, even anything that acknowledges that there's a problem is a big step forward.
Yes, gentleman over here. You had a question, I believe?
The figures are not absolutely accurate, but there's estimated that about 40% of the population is of a migrant and non-Melanesian background. Of West Papua? Maybe I should, yes. Look, clearly the demographic has changed. What was interesting to me is when the plebiscite run by the UN in East Timor was ultimately held, non-Indigenous East Timorese were not allowed to vote. Yeah. So I don't know whether that's a precedent for some plebiscite in West Papua, but it's certainly interesting that even the Indonesians acknowledged and didn't fight that issue. But the demographics are clearly very different, and as you say, the rights of those 40% of 4.5 million need to be respected as well. I tend to view, and Herman can probably back this up or correct me, but my understanding is that currently the independence movement in West Papua is being driven by the younger generation of university-educated students, rather than the Highlanders, who perhaps played a more prominent role in the OPM back in the 70s and 80s. So, but even having said that, it's certainly driven from the Melanesian population. There's no doubt about that. But I think what's more interesting is how the next generation who've grown up, the Herman's generation and the generation after, and how well mobilised they have become. Because in the past, the resistance, if you like, the insurgency within West Papua was seen as predominantly, at least in the 80s, 70s and 80s, something that came from the highlands. Now it's not. It's coming from some of the urban centres. And that's as a result of education, organisation, sort of the normal explanations. But Herman could probably say more about that.
Yes, today our people struggling inside, we based on the non-violent struggle in peaceful means. Yeah, because I was a student activist. I know how students' movement inside, they are working to build up the building the new nation state we call West Papuan. Maybe international community doubt about our struggling, but today I can improve that we are ready to run our future government. So that's why in West Papua we have 312 tribes. Common language is Indonesia and also some Pidgin, but we can use Papuan Malay, that's like to communicate each other, and then how we can build a movement, build our nationalism. And we have structure today like we call West Papua National Authority as a political transition government. We have like executive leadership inside in West Papua, and National Congress, and judiciary. And when special autonomy offered by Jakarta to try find a way to solving political problem in West Papua, but West Papuan student movement, we believe in our motto, one people, one soul. Different tribes, but one spirit of how we can build all together, and we call one people, one soul. So that's why when we organized massive protests on 8 and 9 July, we reject special autonomy and we try, this is our structure for run our future government. That's why I think for today, I want to say like, West Papua, on behalf of my friends, I mean, we have different kind of ideas, like different with our older people. Maybe they left West Papua in the past, in 1960s, 70s. It's totally different for today. Like today, I can speak using mobile phone and then can organize people to having peaceful demonstration and to show it international like, this is we want. We want Jakarta and West Papuan political leader to sit together, but mediated by international community. That's a right way can solve our problem in West Papua. We can't let Jakarta handle Papuan case, just like living under what they call, like this one, outside people can see. That's always Indonesia try to, explain to international community like West Papua, they're not ready to have their own future. But that's confused international community. But we believe, as a young generation, I believe like we can run our future government. Yeah, I believe I spend my time here in Australia. Maybe I'm a good leader in the future. Thank you.